Welcome. Thanks everyone for coming, by the way. I'm Rachel Ford. I'm the preservation planner for the city. So I work with BAR. I do a lot of the staff reviews. You've probably seen me in the permit center. And we thought for our next BAR University, we would do historic property research, a kind of what it is, why you need it, and some of the easiest ways to find stuff publicly. A quick agenda for the evening, or I guess the afternoon. Why do you need historic research? Some of the historic research resources, trying to say that 3 times fast, that we're going to be covering. And then kind of a mock historic research exercise so you can see really what I'm talking about and how to go through these sources. Followed by the resource handout, which you probably have. It's this little sheet. So we'll go over it a little more in detail, but these are a lot of the resources we'll be covering today. And then concluding with questions. So why do you need historic research? There's a couple of reasons. The first kind of biggest one, BAR board submittals, pretty much across the board, every submittal you're going to make to the board requires historic context. So you got to have it, and so we're here to help you find easy ways to find it. It can also help speed along regular BAR reviews. So even if it's a staff review, if we're looking for a certain building element and you happen to know that it's, say, less than 50 years old and you have evidence to prove that, if you include it, sometimes it can help speed things along. And that also goes for just kind of really helping to date the age of certain elements. That combined with the category of the building can help you determine if your application is going to need to go before the Board of Architectural Review, or if it might be something that can be handled by staff. So it sounds like a lot of legwork on your part, but it can really kind of help streamline your application process. And staff are always here to help as well, but we want to make it as easy for you all to find stuff as well. So also, if you have questions throughout, please just raise your hand and we'll answer as we go. I tried to make it as straightforward as possible, but that doesn't always work. So these are some of the research resources that we're going to be going over. They're not really in any particular order. You can go in any order you want. I tried to come up with kind of the main way staff run through the resources and how we use them to create what we think makes sense for how to kind of piece it all together. But so the first one is going to be MapNet or GIS. This is a city resource. It's a good way to get parcel ID information, so your TMS number if you don't already have it. It can give you some basic tax information. It can show you parcels on the lot according to city sources. So if you have sheds, garages, property lines, it kind of shows all of that. It can also give a date on the building based off of our tax records. And it'll work in conjunction, and we'll get into kind of more about it as we go. But then the next one is going to be a good way to find the historic district for your building or property. So if you don't already know what district you're in, how to find it. And that is on our BAR website, but I'm going to show you how to get there and find that. If anyone's familiar with the interactive zoning map, that also has historic districts listed, and we're going to go through that. So a lot of these resources, oh, did you have a question?
I wanted to ask a question on the GIS, the MapNet. I know you can go in there, and if you have the parcel code, you can find a plat or a survey of the property as it is today. Is it also possible to go look and see what it looked like 50 years ago?
Not from GIS, not from MapNet, but we're going to show you some ways to see that.
Thank you.
So then the next one is the city's architectural inventory. This again is on the BAR website. There were 2 architectural inventories done by the city, one in 1974, one in 1986. We have an Excel spreadsheet and a PDF on our website that show the buildings that were surveyed and their category, which again, we will get into what that really means and how that can help you later. But just so you know, that is a good resource to have. It's on the city website. And then CSS information, vertical files, and survey cards. So CSS is the customer self-service portal. If you've ever submitted a permit or applied for the board, you should be familiar with it. It's how you go to apply. There's also a function on it, again, we will get into, that allows you to search past permits. They're from about 2018 to the present, and so you can see some work that's been done on the house. And then vertical files are physical files that go back from about 1980 to 2018. They're in the permit center, and they're also available to the public. You just have to come to the BAR desk and ask. And then the survey cards are from that architectural inventories we talked about. They took photos and listed categories on the building, so you can see the actual survey card from those inventories for the listed properties. Again, the physicals are going to be in the permit center, so city staff can help you. Another one, a big one, especially if you've applied to the board before, is Sanborn fire insurance maps. They're one of the main things that the BAR looks for historic context, because they're going to be one of the best ways to see how building massing has changed on a lot through time. They run from about 1884 to 1955, so they're a very good resource. And then there's also, maybe surprisingly, Google Maps, current and past views. We'll get into it, but there is a past view function that goes back to about 2007, so you can see some changes. Historic Charleston Foundation Online Archive is another great resource. They have a lot of historical information on city buildings, and there's ways to access it online. It also gives you a great place for more in-depth research. And then the Historic Aerials website, which shows some more building massing that we'll get into. So the first place and where we start is we're going to be researching kind of a mock property, 44 Queen Street. So the way city staff typically start is we're going to try and find out the age of the building and its location in the historic district. So for what that means for you guys is starting with MapNet. The best way to do it, the city website, I'll be honest, it has a lot of resources on it, but that also means it can be a little confusing to find stuff. So generally, if you Google City of Charleston and then whatever you're looking for, that is one of the best, easiest, most direct ways to get to stuff. So in this case, I would recommend Googling City of Charleston GIS. And then you'll see in the little red box, there's a MapNet button right on Google. So you click that and you will get the MapNet. So this is what it looks like. And then you'll put in, you can see 44 Queen Street up in that right-hand corner. And it'll show you the current parcel and the lot, as well as buildings on it. And then on the left-hand side, you have various information. Particularly for historic research, you're going to want the TMS number. It's also called the parcel ID number. If it is your home, you probably already have it somewhere, but if you ever need to find it again, this can be a good place. And it is actually in MapNet a hyperlink. So if you click on the TMS number, it's going to take you to the Charleston County Register of Deeds. So this is the deed information page for your property. So it shows the current owner, it shows some past semi-recent deed purchases or sales, but what we really are interested in is this additional information tab in the red, it's in the red box. So if you click on additional property info, it'll give you some really important information. The main one is the year built. So in this particular case for 44 Queen, it says it was built in 1796. So BAR will definitely be reviewing that. You can almost guarantee. It also, if in that section, dwelling information, it'll list some other buildings that are on the property sometimes and the ages those were built. So things like detached garages, I think sometimes it'll list sheds, and then sometimes it'll even have a picture of the massing. So it can kind of give you a good beginning place to start. Yeah.
Is there a way to tell from GIS if a property is within city jurisdiction or if it's like county or a different town or city?
Yes. So I mean, anything on the peninsula is going to be county, or sorry, is going to be city. It gets trickier when you're getting into West Ashley, James Island, Daniel Island, that kind of situation. MapNet may have the layers. Actually, it does because I believe our MapNet will only let you search city properties. So if it's not listed on MapNet, it's not in the city. But I would also recommend checking out the interactive zoning map, which is also something that we'll get into, and I think that'll have more specific information for that. So once you have kind of the date, you have a TMS number, there's a couple ways to find your historic district. So the first option is go to the BAR website. You can just Google City of Charleston Board of Architectural Review. The URL is also at the top there, and you'll get our website. If you scroll down a little bit, there's going to be two options for how to get to this PDF. One is I think the top link is just going to have the actual PDF, and then the bottom PDF link will have this as well as a chart that lays out the different historic districts and what can be done in them. That chart's later in the presentation, so you'll see an example of that as well. But so you would click either of these, and sorry, I thought it would be bigger on here, but they're BAR District Boundaries Map or BAR Jurisdiction Review Chart and Map. So either of those will take you here. This is a PDF, it's a static map, so you would have to know your cross streets and find your address. And then you could see, based on the color coding, if you're in the Old City District, the Old and Historic District, Historic Corridor District, or Historic Materials Demolition Purview. So you're really just identifying the district here, because that's going to identify kind of what BAR requirements are going to be for you in your review. The potentially easier way, it's not going to require you to look at your cross streets and scrutinize a small map, is if you use the interactive zoning map. So again, if you Google City of Charleston zoning interactive map, you will get it. In that upper left-hand corner, you're going to put in the address. So this is an example with 44 Queen. You'll put in the address, and then you can see in that bottom left-hand corner, there's a whole bunch of different zoning layers that you can turn on the map. It's basically different color coding keys and overlays. And so there is one for each historic district. So let's see if this works. So you can see kind of in blue, this little parcel, that's 44 Queen. And then kind of the horizontal lines, that's the old and historic district, excuse me. So you can kind of see where it is without having to scrutinize. Again, this zoning interactive map also shows parcels on the lot. It can give you the TMS number, some other basic information. Any questions so far? I know it's a lot. Okay, so once you have that, another place to go, so you now have the age of the building, and you have where it is in BAR jurisdiction. You're going to want to check our architectural inventory. Again, this is on the BAR website. So if you Google City of Charleston, Board of Architectural Review, you'll get our website. I highly recommend perusing it. Outside of historic research, it has policy statements for a lot of different things. It has information, guidelines, all types of stuff. But if you scroll to the bottom of our website, you'll get this resources tab, and you'll see historic resources, surveys, and architectural inventories. So if you click that, it'll take you to, well, can't really see it, but the historic resources and architectural inventory page. The top one, the City of Charleston architectural inventory, is for everything south of Lion Street. So that's going to be the Old and Historic District and a lot of the Old City District. And it is our two main surveys. The other one is going to be the Upper Peninsula Architectural Inventory. This is primarily for properties north of Lion Street. So it's our historic materials demo purview. And so anything north of Lion Street, you're going to want that bottom Upper Peninsula Architectural Survey option. And there are PDFs and Excel spreadsheets for both. It's kind of choose your adventure, whichever one is easier for you. Both should be easily searchable. So for this exercise for the 44 Queen, I did the City of Charleston Architectural Inventory, the PDF. And you can see I command find in it, so it'll pull up a little search bar. It's just Control F. I type in the street name, and then you scroll down to the address. And it tells you the street name, the address, and the category of the building as it was surveyed and which survey that came from. So for 44 Queen, this is the 1974 survey, determined it was a Category 2 building. So mainly the architectural inventory you're looking at to get the category of the building and to see if it's listed or rated. So if it's not there, it just means it wasn't surveyed.
What does it mean when the easement is red?
That's a good question. I think it's red primarily so that it stands out and we can see it.
Some of them are, some of them aren't.
Yeah, we've had several updates done to the inventory and added to over time. Every year, Historic Charleston Foundation and Preservation Society send us their easement lists. So it's possible that it was just someone put them in as black one year and red the next. We are working to kind of revamp and standardize, make sure everything's correct and cohesive. So there will be an update coming eventually. But yeah, red versus black for easements is not necessarily indicative of anything. And for those of you who don't know, historic foundations, primarily Historic Charleston Foundation and Preservation Society of Charleston, have what are called historic easements on several properties around town. It's basically a legal contract that's going to follow the deed of the property, and it was set up with a homeowner for the property and a certain historic preservation society at some point. And they vary based on the property. We don't have the details, but they do enable historic societies to review a lot of changes made to the building. And so if you have an easement on a property and you're going to have to go talk to that historic society and get an approval form signed by them before you bring it to the city. One of the things we're looking for is if they have an easement. If they do, we don't really know the terms of it. We just tell you to go talk to them and that we can't do anything until we have seen that they're okay with whatever changes are proposed.
Might be kind of a silly question, but having lived here for a while, what's the difference between the Historic Charleston Foundation and the Preservation Society? Are they two separate organizations?
Yep. So they're two separate organizations. Both are nonprofits. They were started at different times. They both work on preservation in the city, but they do different things and have very similar but still different goals. Preservation Society is down on King Street. Historic Charleston Foundation is on the Battery. And Historic Charleston Foundation has house museums like the Nathaniel Russell and Aiken-Rhett. The Preservation Society, I don't think they have any open museums. No. But so they have different goals. They're different organizations. Neither is officially affiliated with the city. But they're just two nonprofits working in the city. Okay. Any questions on the architectural inventory? So another good place to check, again, coming from the Board of Architectural Review website, is our customer self-service or CSS portal. So I put the URL to the CSS website up there. You can access it from the Board of Architectural Review, our homepage. If you're on the top of the page and you click on submittal requirements, you'll see there's a green hyperlink towards under board submittals, and that'll take you to the CSS portal. To use it for public permit searches, you don't have to have an account. You just are going to click search public records in that bottom left-hand side, and then you'll put in the address, click search, and you can see these are all public access permits that have been done for 44 Queen. So a little caveat with this, is the CSS portal really got up and going around 2018. So the portal is good for permits from about 2018 to the present. So everything now is in CSS. Anything before 2018, you're going to want to come into the permit center and go through what are called the vertical files. So they're these, and they are BAR specific. They're past BAR decisions and permit applications for that specific property. So if you want to look at a vertical file, you can come into the permit center, just come to the BAR desk at station 8, tell us you want to look at a vertical file. We'll pull it for you. You're welcome to take pictures of anything you find in the file. You just can't take the file with you, and we can't make copies. But other than that, like I said, you're welcome to take photos, take notes, all that kind of stuff, and you just bring it back to the desk when you're done, and we'll refile it. The other good thing that's in the permit center that can be a good resource is those survey cards. So the 1974 and 1986 architectural inventories, when they went around and looked at all the properties, they took photos, and sometimes they included things like construction date or architect, a general description of the home, things like that. So if you ever want to look at the survey card, you can come into the permit center and we can pull it for you. Looking at that architectural inventory online is a good way to see if there would be a survey card. So if the property shows up in the architectural inventory and is listed either a 1 through a 4, there's a good chance that it's in the architectural inventory survey cards. So yeah, just come to the BAR desk. You don't need an appointment, and we can help you. Any questions so far? No. Okay. So you're going to have to bear with me on this one now. Sanborn fire insurance maps. This is one of the things that BAR board submittals are always looking for. They're one of the key pieces for historic context. And there are several different ways to find them. So I included several different methods. So I apologize if it gets convoluted or weird. Just let me know. But so the first one is the true public access. They are available on the Library of Congress website. So if you Google Library of Congress, you'll get their website. You just type into the search bar, Charleston, South Carolina, Sanborn fire insurance maps. And they will pull up a whole list of the maps there. And you can look at thumbnails, and we'll go into how to actually read the maps as well, but not on the Library of Congress website, just because we use a different way. But the other way, if you have a Charleston County Library card, the library has links to the digital Sanborn maps. You can access them at home. If you go into the library, you can also access them at a library computer there. Also, the main branch library is right across the street from the city building. So it's right there on Calhoun. But so if you Google Charleston County Public Library, again, there's going to be a couple ways to access them. The first is you'll see it's just digital Sanborn maps as an actual option when you Google, and it'll take you to this page, and then you can just click on the URL, and it'll ask you to put in your library card information, and then it'll take you there. The other option is if, and this is the screen it'll give you when you click on that URL. The other option is if you click on the Charleston County Public Library main link on Google, it'll take you to their library homepage, and you can click the research tab under their main search bar. And it'll take you to this kind of list of blue menu items. If you go to history and geography, it'll give you another choose your adventure for how to access Sanborn maps. So digital Sanborn maps tab or the fire insurance maps online tab. They're the same Sanborn fire insurance maps. They're just provided by different carriers. So one, if you pick, I think the top option, you'll get the blue screen. If you pick the bottom option, you'll get the green screen. Again, it's the same information. It's kind of ease of access to your own personal preference, but they are the same thing.
Do you happen to know whether some of these displays of data early in the Google search are specific to Google?
Like versus Firefox or Safari or something. I don't think they're specific, but they should. I think even if they are, you should be able to get the main page. And so you may have to navigate the kind of longer way. But yeah, I haven't tried from Safari or Firefox in a long time.
Thank you.
But yeah, I personally like to use the green website. They're the same maps between the two, but for some reason the ones on the green website are in color. And I like colors, so sometimes it's easier to see. But so it really is just you click on. In the blue box, it'll be the state, and then you can choose if you want to search by a map or a drop down in the green box. I usually do the drop down. And then you can choose the city, and it's going to be Charleston. There is an option for Charleston County, you're looking for Charleston City, the city of Charleston, because those are city of Charleston specific maps. And you'll see the green drop down kind of shows you all of the options. So the maps run 1884, 1888, 1902, 1944, 1951, and 1955. 1944, 1951, and 1955 actually have 2 volumes for each map. And the reason for that is because just as time went on, Charleston expanded, there was more to the city, so they couldn't fit it all on one map page. But so you click on whatever map you want to look at. So for this example, this is the 1884 map, the first page of the 1884 map in both services. So again, it's the same information, it's just the one on the blue website is black and white, and the one here is color coded. You can get thumbnail views for either. Again, either works. The rest of the example is going to be in the blue, or in the green service, excuse me, just because that's what I personally use. But every map is going to have this kind of title page, first page, that is a full map of the area. And then it'll also have an index page that lists like the street names and addresses. So you can search the maps in one of 2 ways. You can use the first page or kind of the index at the last page. So this is a close-up of it. Let me see if I can find it. So you can kind of see they're all gridded. So each color or each number corresponds to a different page number. So if you're using the Peninsula map and you want to find, say, 44 Queen Street, you would find where Queen Street is on this map, and you would say, okay, it's a little too small for me to read, but so theoretically it's in section 11. So then on the index, you're going to go to page 11, and then you're going to find 44 Queen Street. If you're using the index, you would just go to Q, look for Queen, and then you're looking for your street name or your street number, and it'll have that page index as well. And then you would go to page 11. So both work to get there. Sometimes one is faster. Sometimes if you have a property that's right at kind of a 4-way intersection that's also splitting the different pages, it can require you to go to the actual map to look at, just because it gets a little confusing. But are y'all following so far? Okay. So when you get to, so the 1884 map, this is page 11. This is 44 and 46 Queen Street in 1884. So the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company, they were a fire insurance company that insured buildings all over the country, and they would make maps of all of the areas that they surveyed, and they would update them periodically. So a lot of the reason why we like Sanborn maps is because they span a wide period of time. They show the massing of the building over time, and if you look at the key on that first map of the whole peninsula, it also tells you information. So red is often brick buildings, yellow can be wood dwellings. It indicates the number of stories some buildings have, piazzas, how many stories on the piazza, all types of information that is good to see, good to know, and can change over time. So that's one of the main reasons we like it. So,
Can I ask you a question before you change that? Mm-hmm. If you're not in the historic district and you're further up the peninsula, mm-hmm. Does that show up on these maps too?
Yes, so depending on the year. So that's another reason, and thank you for
asking. It wasn't
asking.
developed at that time, but it was property, a farm, plantation, whatever at that time, so it would show up on the map.
Yeah, so you can kind of see, this is, like I said, the 1884 map, so all of the kind of color-coded part with numbers, those are the parts that have sheets with them with the dwellings on it. But you can see the rest of Charleston has been laid out. So in 1884, this is the extent of what the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company mapped. But as the years go on, they move further up the neck and they map more. And some of it is just here. So if it is a plantation in 1884 and it's further up, you may want to check like the Charleston County Sanborns or something.
how far up did the city actually go at that time?
I think it's around this distance. I think it's a little opaque because you're always going to have people who lived further up. But the city limits were, I think, a little more fluid throughout time, especially as they're building.
Is there any way you can tell what that top street would be
Yes.
now to see?
So this top street does actually have a name. It's just that the picture doesn't. It's a little too blurry to read right now.
Oh, okay.
But it does have a name. So you could look at the 1884 map and be like, okay, I see it stops here.
Okay.
Go to Google Maps and see, how far away that street is. Another thing that I will note, so this is the 1884, so this is the oldest map for Charleston from Sanborn Fire Insurance Company. This is the 1955, so this is the newest map from Sanborn Fire Insurance Company that the public library offers. Street addresses did change over time, which confuses things, I know. But so if you look at the cross streets and then look at kind of the shape of the building, you can still find it. So in 1884, 44 Queen was actually 34 Queen. So not too far off, but still different. But if you look at the shape of it in 1884 and 1955, you can see that it's still the same building. So just be aware, 1884, the addresses can be a little spotty. So check cross streets as well.
Could you give us those years again for the maps?
Yep. So 1884, 1888, 1902, 1944, 1951, and 1955. And when you're doing a BAR board application or something like that, the board members really do want to see as many dates the property is on a Sanborn as possible, to see whether things have changed or not. So including all of them is great. You can download them as JPEGs from the websites and then just crop them to be closer if you want. So any questions on Sanborns? No. So then the next resource is going to be Google Maps, which sounds silly. I would also add just regular Google as well. But so if you just Google 44 Queen Street, you can get, and go to the maps function, you'll get kind of a street view of 44 Queen Street. So it can be useful. It can be useful to see kind of the cross streets and all of that in conjunction with Sanborn, so using that for help with Sanborns. But then also if you go to the street view, where that little red box is, it currently says see latest date, but it also says see past dates if you don't already have them up. And you can see that there's dates going back to 2007. So depending on what you're looking for, if you think, man, I think this was probably put on in the last 20 years, if you can go back to 2007 and show us that it was not there in 2007, that's useful. So it's a good way to see, a good way to look. Sometimes even if you're looking to find a paint color because you want to see what the house, you know it was painted recently, but you don't know what year. If it's the same color in 2007, maybe that's a good indication that it's been that way for a while. And then also just regular Google. Sometimes Googling, especially if it's a category 1 or 2 property, you can find all kinds of stuff, whether that's the historic Charleston archive that's just popping up, or if a property is a National Register property and that's the nomination is coming up, you would be surprised about what you can find just searching the address. You will get, the realtor.com and the Zillow and all of that. But if you just scroll past that, sometimes you'll be surprised at what you find. So that brings us to our next resource, which is the Historic Charleston Foundation online archive. They also have an in-person archive, but the online archive is a good way to start. Again, especially if you have a category 1 or 2 building, these are buildings that have been determined to be incredibly historically significant. There's a good chance Historic Charleston Foundation has something on that. Whether that's documentation photos from the Historic American Building Survey that happened periodically around the peninsula, or Clemson University historic preservation students did a property research on the property. A lot of those go to Historic Charleston to be accessible to the public. So again, Googling just very specifically what you want, Historic Charleston Foundation Archive. It gets a little confusing sometimes because they do have an archives and resources page. I personally like to go to the Historic Charleston Foundation online collections. The URL says, what is it, Past Perfect Online. But that is, I find, to be the easiest to use. So if you click on that, you'll get the page on the left. And you can search by any way up there. This one I just did keyword search, and then I just typed in 44 Queen on the street on the keyword search over in that screen. And it'll give you all kinds of search results related to it. Historic Charleston Foundation has a lot of property files. The online archive really just tells you oftentimes that the property file exists. So then reaching out to Historic Charleston Foundation and seeing if you can get, a time to come visit, or if they have any more information, always good. In this case, up top is a quick building history that came out of the Buildings of Charleston book. And then it also details other resources on 44 Queen that are available. So a good kind of further deep dive search. It's not necessarily required that you go to this level, but it's kind of a good, if you're curious, if you want it, if you're looking for something really specific or trying to date something really specific, HCF's archive can be a very good resource. They do have copyright policies as well, so check with them before you're reproducing or, publicizing any of that information, but they're a good resource. The last one that we'll kind of cover is the Historic Aerials Viewer website. So this also has copyright, so what you find on it, it's free and accessible to the public, but you can't really take, screenshots of the aerial photos. But you can see, so you Google Historic Aerial Viewer, and you'll get this website. If you type in by this red box up here, your address, it will need to be kind of the whole address. So 44 Queen will go anywhere in the world. So you need to do 44 Queen Street, Charleston, South Carolina. And then you can kind of zoom in on the map, but you can also see there are a ton of years listed in the aerial images. These go from about, I think it's 1951, about 1951 to present day. So some of it can be covered by Google Maps and is not in copyright. But really, so about 1955 to 74 are really good years to look at. The 74 aerials are really crisp, and so it can be really good. It's also right around that 50-year period for buildings.
If you type in an address and the building didn't exist, let's say in 1951, would you get a picture of a vacant lot, or will it tell you? Okay.
Yep, they're just aerial images that were taken of the city in those years. So whatever is there is kind of what was there. So it'll show it. Any questions on? And again, that's about as far as we could go on this, just because copyright. But so those are a lot of kind of the major resources that we have. And so looking at all those resources, kind of what did we get just from this kind of quick explanation. So now we know 44 Queen Street was built around 1976, according to tax records. It's located in the Old and Historic District. It's a Category 2 building. It's located between Church and Meeting Streets. The overall building form has not been significantly altered between 1884 and 1955. I did look at Google Maps, so there were no major changes to the street facade between 2007 and 2024. I did look at the historic aerial viewer, but I couldn't really add that. And so there were not significant changes between 55 and today as well. Other than that, I now know that the HCF archive has a quick history on the property and that it has more information in person should I decide to set up a site visit and go visit them. I also included the 84 and the 55 zoomed in so you can kind of see what the property looked like in those years on the Sanborns. Again, if I was doing this for a full board submittal, I would include all of the Sanborn years that I could have access to. And then what that means for me, now that I know it's a Category 2 building and it's in the old and historic district, I would also go back to the BAR website and I would find the does my project need BAR approval? So it lists the different historic districts. So purple, the one on the far left, is going to be the old and historic district. And it's going to tell me what BAR has purview over for that area. So in the old and historic district, that's our strictest district. So that's going to be all new construction, all exterior repairs and alterations, any form of demo, and signage. So I can kind of quickly see what is definitely going to have to be BAR reviewed and kind of scrutinized. The thing on the right, the form on the right, is our policy statements on applications to be processed by staff. So what that is kind of a general guideline on what types of applications can be done by staff and what's going to need to be going to the board itself. You'll also notice there's a little caveat at the bottom here. It says all applications for alterations to Category 1 and 2 structures are to be considered by the Board of Architectural Review and are not included in the above list except for numbers 1, 2, and 3. So by knowing the category of the building, I automatically know that anything outside of an in-kind repair, signage, or painting is going to have to go to the Board of Architectural Review.
So looking at that map that was on there, or the
Yep, they're all come in the booklet, yeah.
yes. So landmark overlay wasn't on the map. Is landmark overlay, are those actually things that are like deemed landmarks?
Yeah, so the landmark overlay is actual landmarks.
Okay.
So the historic districts are put forth by the city. So there are city districts, but the National Register landmarks are kind of a separate thing.
And are those within like just the bounds of the actual landmark, or is that like a zone or?
So it is the specific landmark.
Okay.
I know there's some like the Charlestown Landing is a national landmark, so the entire Charlestown Landing site, that type of thing.
I didn't know if like Rainbow Row was.
No. So, I mean, yes, it is reviewed because it is in the old and historic district. It does, I think, also happen to be in the National Register.
Yeah.
So we would review it kind of for both of those.
The landmark overlay was originally National Register properties that did not fall under BAR purview for some reason.
Okay.
Like they're off the peninsula. Now, some of them are within that historic materials demolition purview, but they still fall under the landmark category because it is a stricter review, and they're typically for National Register properties. There's a couple of things that the city deemed to be landmarks, and those are covered under that district as well.
Okay. Cool.
Fun fact, not everybody knows.
Yes.
Yep. And could you explain the Category 1 and Category 2 buildings?
So what are they? Yep. So that's based off of our architectural inventory. So that 1974 and 1986 inventory, those are primarily south of really Line Street by 86. But they were surveyed on a scale of 1 to 4. So Category 1 and 2 buildings are deemed to be kind of our most historic, most important buildings. And again, this is also based on what they were thinking in 1974 and 1986. So sometimes just because a building wasn't listed doesn't necessarily mean it's not historic and not important. It just means that in 1974, maybe it was less than 50 years old at the time, so they couldn't survey it for the inventory just based off of National Register.
So if they're now over 50 years old, can they go to a different category?
That would require us to resurvey things, which we would love to do. And we're working on some surveys to update. But yeah, it's not like an automatic.
So what would 3 and 4 be?
3 and 4 are buildings that are still architecturally significant. A lot of them would be things like Charleston single houses that maybe we don't know necessarily who own them, or they're building typographies that are very typical to Charleston and important to Charleston architecture. And then to confuse things a little bit more, that upper north of Line Street has an additional survey that was done in the 2000s that also surveyed buildings, and it's that same 1 to 4 category. It's just a little newer, but it's the same premise. 1 and 2 are most important architectural items. 3 and 4 are also still
So
important.
if you live in that area, then can you find out which category your property is?
So if you live north of Line Street, sorry, it's going to take me a minute to get back. You'd still go to the BAR website, and you would still scroll to the bottom where it says resources, and you would still click historic resources, surveys, and architectural inventories. It'll take you to this page. The first one is south of Line Street, basically, and the second one is north of Line Street. Both are keyword searchable, and yeah, that makes sense. Other questions?
Do you have any other, maybe like favorite online archives for finding photographs other than Past Perfect, maybe like the CCPL newspaper archives?
Yeah. So these were kind of the main ones that get you really started in historic research. For deeper dives, the CCPL newspaper is really good. For those of you who don't know, it's also on the Charleston County Public Library website. It's a newspaper collection called the Charleston Archive, and it has newspapers from the 1700s up to today. It is also keyword searchable, and so if you wanted to really dig into the history of 44 Queen, you could type in 44 Queen and see every newspaper article that comes up. Other resources, just generally, Library of Congress website. It's good for a lot of things. The Historic American Building surveys are on the Library of Congress website. They were a Works Progress Administration initiative in the 1930s primarily, where they basically paid architects to go around and survey old, cool buildings. So there are a lot done in Charleston, so they're a good place. The Preservation Society of Charleston we recommend speaking with. Again, newspaper research. Low Country Digital Library is another free online archive that has a lot of information. If you Google National Register for Charleston, you can pull up the actual National Register nominations and see what specific properties. There is also an 1886 earthquake report. So after the 1886 earthquake, the city went around and surveyed damage. And so they noted things like what type of roof a property had in 1886 and the condition it was in and major parts of the building that were damaged. So it can also be a good resource. I think the Charleston County Library has it. So you can go talk to them, the South Carolina room, or BAR staff also have it.
So the pictures of the report, or is it just like a?
There are photos. I think the microfilm is at the Charleston County Library in the South Carolina room. And then another really good resource that's also a city resource is the City of Charleston Records Management Division. So I mentioned that all BAR permit information from 1880 to 2018 is in our vertical file. Anything before 1880, basically we ran out of room for in the permit center, and so we sent it on up to records management. So they have much older histories of BAR permit properties. They also have all kinds of other resources. They have the city yearbooks are up there, I believe. that kind of detail every year. The city released kind of a report on the status of the city. Those are in the yearbooks. Just all kinds of information, things you wouldn't necessarily think to look for. So if you're looking for something older than 1880 and you don't know where else to go, I'd recommend contacting records management, and they can probably get you on a good path, if not give you the answer. Other question?
Question, and if we have time, could you maybe go over reading Sanborn's beyond just like general massing?
Yeah. What are you specifically looking for?
Like I know D means dwelling, and I know they have keys too, which say a lot of this, but
Yeah.
colors, building materials.
So a lot of it is going to depend on the year. And I think I'll do what I can. They're kind of hard to read on the screens, the full sizes that I pulled up. But yeah, so this is dwelling. The dashed line typically indicates a piazza. There's a 2 here. This indicates a 2-story piazza. And so they do it for the stories for each massing as well. So this is a 3-story brick building followed by a 2-story kind of brick connector infill, and then a 2-story brick building. And it just kind of keeps going like that. If there's no information, it's probably a 1-story building. I believe these are windows. A lot of it's kind of the basic information. Yellow usually indicates wood. You'll see sometimes asbestos is noted on the building as you get into the 40s and 50s. They'll note churches. You can see the 55. They specifically call them out as apartments versus a dwelling. It really kind of depends on the year of the Sanborn, and that first page is kind of the large map of the peninsula. Really small here, but it does have a key. So all of them should have a key that tells you what the color coding is. Sometimes if you still can't find the answer, you can go honestly Google it, because Sanborns were done all throughout the country. So there are a whole bunch of cities that have this information, and people are looking at them for a whole variety of things. So sometimes you can Google and it'll honestly tell you what it is. And there's some really weird ones. Certain Sanborns, like the 1902 Sanborn, has designations on the home that say FB. It stands for female boarding. And a lot of them are thought to have been brothels. And those appear as FBs throughout the country. So it's just like a weird notation that they made that year. And then they kind of disappear. So it is kind of really specific to the year, and then some things are more general throughout, like the red, pink is brick, and the yellow is wood. Does that help? There are, if you didn't grab one, we have the BAR University handout. This is also a PDF that's going to be online at the BAR website. If you go to the BAR University tab, you'll find the handout. It has basically the URLs for a lot of the resources that we covered. So again, you can type them in from the physical, or if you download the PDF, you should be able to just click on the link and it'll open it. All of this has been recorded, so it will be made available online. The slides from the presentation will be online as well. But yeah, any final questions?
A comment.
Mm-hmm.
This is very interesting. Last night, I met one of my neighbors from Ansonboro it was a meeting, so I couldn't find out how did he find this out.
Yeah.
But he found out a couple of things. One was his address had changed from number 1 to number 17 over the years, as you said. And the other thing was the fellow that lived in his house during the Revolutionary War was the person who right after the Battle of Sullivan's Island, which the rebels won, he rode to Philadelphia all the way to report on July 3rd to the Continental Congress about, hey, we won this one, let's do it, let's declare independence. And next day they did.
Wow.
So that's the story.
Very cool. I will say you did remind me, a very cool story as well. The Charleston County Library also has city directories. So if you want to see who lived in a house, that can be another good way to do it. So deed records will show you who owned the house. There is a long history of rental properties throughout Charleston. So oftentimes people who owned it may not have